Happy New Year and welcome to 2022. I wanted to record a video to share some of the insights that I've had in the past year of 2021, the year that wasn't what we expected it to be, but so many transformations, so many growths, and also the resolutions that I've made for 2022, the year ahead. Now, I'm not normally a person for resolutions. I'm sort of the mind that if you want to do something, you just do it. I also like to review my progress on a weekly basis, if not at least monthly. So it's not something that I do only once a year. But what's interesting about this time of the year is that there is a ritual that happens collectively where we all intentionally look at the progress that we've made, look at how we can improve things into the new year. And that in itself is kind of a beautiful thing. So I want to share some of the things that I've decided to not change, but certainly, I guess, optimize or improve. So 2021 was a really interesting year for so many of us. So many of us still had lockdowns. We still had the inability to go out to cafes and all of these things, the virus and all its variants, and then the division happening between vaccinated and unvaccinated, and everybody just trying to get along. But while all of this turmoil was happening in the world, I have to be honest, it was one of my favorite years to date in my life. And what's really interesting about that comment is that this hasn't been my most financially successful year on record by far, in fact. And yes, it has been the most fulfilling, the most grounding, the most nurturing year for me, despite all the lockdowns, despite everything that's happening and the fear and all of this division all over the world. And the reason for that is that just before the new year of 2021, so just before we entered 2021, was when I finally, months before that new year was when I finally was able to shed a depression that I had been living with for many, many years that had brought me down to deep suicidal thoughts. And in fact, I'd had many suicide attempts in 2020. And it had really messed up my business. It messed up my personal life, obviously. And it was just a few months before we rung in 2021, like literally November, that I finally started to feel myself again. And I was still a little bit lonely back then. And I remember when January 2021 came in, even on that New Year's, I was feeling lonely. I didn't have a partner. And while I had gotten rid of the depression, there was still parts of me that I felt were missing in my life. And I remember thinking to myself, I was camping with my children at that time, thinking to myself, 2021, I just want to feel good. I just want to feel whole. I want to feel fulfilled. So my intentions for that year were really to refocus myself back on the relationship with myself. And oh my gosh, totally changed my life, reconnecting with myself in that way, because the truth is I had lost my own hand. I had lost my way through and through. And it was maybe 2 weeks after that New Year's that I finally started to feel happy and just loving life. And I was happy being single for the first time probably in my entire life. I was just loving being single. I didn't care what I looked like. After having spent, over $100,000 on plastic surgeries, trying to change the way I look because I was so miserable and unhappy, I was finally in a space where I just loved myself. I loved myself with my flaws. I didn't care. I loved being single. And then boom, I met my partner not long after that, this just loving, nurturing man. And the year of 2021 was really a year of play for me. I got to mini retire. I ended up exiting out of a company, which I still have shares in. And it was just a whole beautiful setup of synchronicities and things that came together in the most unexpected of ways to serve me and to nurture me. And to just allow me to take a breather, reconnect with myself, reconnect with what was important to me, and just play. I did a lot of gardening in 2021. I did a lot of hiking. I did a lot of just being out in nature. And I spent a lot of time with my children as well during the lockdowns, which in itself was a really beautiful thing. So I'm actually very grateful for 2021. And despite everything that happened, it was one of the best years that I've ever experienced to date in my life. 2022. So here are the things that I want to reflect on and bring into this new year with me. What I have deeply come to realize is that the relationship I have with myself, hands down, determines my experience of life. It determines everything. The relationship I have with myself creates the perspective I have of the world, and the perspective I have of the world determines what I experience, the reality that I get back. So there are still always things that need to be worked on. Unfortunately, reconnecting with yourself and finding self-worth isn't a set and forget thing, meaning it's not something that you find and then you're done for life. It's like you never have to do this work again. There is continuous integration involved. And one of the things that I'm very grateful for about 2021 is I created the program, the Flow Protocols, and I started to work with clients and entrepreneurs. Conscious alphas is what I call them, people that operate from a space of creation instead of competition. And that program, mentoring and helping people, has in itself really held me accountable to this relationship with myself, which is such a beautiful thing. Like, I never anticipated that, because it really has served me in moments where I have fallen back into low self-esteem, fears, doubts. It happens to all of us, always, all the time. You're always growing. You're always going to new levels. You're always going to encounter limiting beliefs and ideas about yourself that are simply not true, and having to outgrow a perspective that you've subscribed yourself to. That's always scary, right? It's the unknown. It's always scary. So this work is always ongoing. And what's been so crazy to me is that this program that I created has really supported me personally, because I'll encounter a moment in my head of fear or doubt, and I'll think, what would I say to my clients, my students, and be able to hold myself in that space again. So the things that I want to basically make sure that I make 2020 really about is further cementing this relationship I have with myself, like becoming my best friend, getting in step. And one of the things that I've realized about myself that I had been doing my entire childhood, and I stopped somewhere in my maybe 20s, I stopped doing this, was that I used to have a diary, I guess is what you call it. It wasn't like a journal. It was literally a diary where I'd write my day every day. I'd write what I did. And I did this for, from when I could start writing till I was about 18 or 19 years old. And then I just stopped. And while I do journaling every single day now, almost every day, the journaling that I do these days is more gratitude lists, appreciation, my perfect day. It's like future pacing or finding appreciation. It's not necessarily like a chronicle of my day or what happened or my thoughts or these things. And I have realized that, hey, it was a beautiful thing to do, because now I get to go back to those diaries of when I was 7 and read the perspective of this young 7-year-old cat. And what a beautiful journey to like realize how far you've come in life, right? And while it's really nice to read gratitude lists from the past, that's a beautiful exercise as well. There's this element of having a diary that I had my entire childhood that I stopped doing. And for me, this was a flow thing. I did it for almost half my life and I stopped. That's the thing about becoming an adult, right? When we start to get all these responsibilities and adulting, we often lose our imagination, certainly in the capacity that we had as a youth. And we often stop doing the activities that really filled us or made us happy in our younger years. Why? Because we have mortgages to pay, we have duties, we have to-do lists, we have all these things. And it's a real shame because it is those activities that make you really powerful, that allow you to get life serving you, that allow you to step into a state of fulfillment and well-being. And when you are in that space, when you're operating in that space, fuck, it gets good. It gets real good with very little effort, with very little pushing. This is the hardest thing for people to accept, because our idea of reality is the total opposite of that. It's the hustle, it's the pushing, it's the sacrifice that's required. We must give up the things that we love. So for 2022, I'm going to pick up a journal, a diary today, and I intend on going back into writing diaries. My grandfather has like bookshelves of it, and I just love journaling. So I'm going to go back into that, and I'm really interested to see what that does, because the whole point of it is just to reconnect with myself, to be my bestie, and to further cement this relationship. Going back into activities of hiking and flow and the things that make me excited. The other thing that I want to make sure that I am very intentional about in 2022 is my perspective and the fluidity of my perspective, and not getting married to any single view. And this is really interesting because we're so married to our perspectives. We're so set in that this is the way things are and this is how things work. And you see this so much now with the vaccine, how people are so divided and they're so sure of their opinion, which is the most ridiculous thing, because there's no such thing as like a right or a wrong, right? Everything is two-sided. There's perspectives to every layer. There's so many different layers to a situation, right? And case in point, I recently watched The Tiger King season 2. And season 1, I was like, oh yeah, this person murdered this person, and this is definitely what happened. And then they bring out this new season, and just by showing a different angle of a different story, it's like you're so confused, and you're like, oh wait, did they do it? Did they not? I feel bad for them. They deserve to get... It just goes to show, be careful about the perspectives that you've become married to or subscribed to. And I want to adopt more fluidity in my ability to surf, I guess, through different perspectives, because it is so healthy to be able to do that. It is so healthy. It is the capacity to build empathy towards other people, to release your own ideas, to be open to different things. And when you are like this, you don't encounter betrayals as much. You don't encounter people trying to screw you over, or things that make you angry, or all of these things, because you realize those things came about because you had that perspective. You had the perspective of betrayal, and that's why that happened in your life. And it's so easy to slip into those reality tunnels, for lack of a better word, right? So that is something else that I want to bring into 2022. And lastly, then the thing that I also want to practice a little bit more and become more intentional about in this new year is forgiveness. Just forgiving people, forgiving myself especially. I can be really, really hard on myself. I had an upbringing where it's like it had to be done right. If you're going to do something, do it really right. That led to perfectionism in my early entrepreneurial career. Totally curbed my creativity, my ability to be fluid. And even these days, while I've gotten so much better at that, I'm not a perfectionist by any means anymore. I've totally shed that. there's still an element where I expect a very high standard for myself. And sometimes I can beat myself up and I can get really, really hard on myself. And forgiveness is a really important thing because we dish it out so easily to other people, to our kids. But then when it comes to ourselves, it's like a different story where we really have a narcissistic relationship with ourselves. So interesting how all of these things come back to the greater theme of the relationship with myself. That is a big, big theme, and will continue to be in this new year of 2022. I'm not going to make predictions of what's going to happen globally with travel, the pandemic, all of these things, but I will say that there is a beautiful rise in consciousness that is happening throughout the world right now. There needs to be an acknowledgement that so many people have suffered and gone through a really difficult time, especially in the last 2 years, 2021 included. A lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people lost their lives, a lot of people lost loved ones. That is not to be discredited by any means. But there's also a lot of beautiful, positive changes and transformations that have occurred because of the year that we face and the challenges and struggles that we've had. And if we are able to retain fluidity in our perspective, we are able to see that. We are able to see those positive things, the love on the back of strife, because believe me, my friend, love always follows strife. There is always expansion after contrast. There is always balance in this universe. It is the universal law that holds everything together. We don't know why, but it's there. And so in 2022, if we can shift our perspective to see the beautiful transformations and growths and the love that is following the strife and the contrast, then it is sure to be a beautiful year for each and every single one of us that can achieve that. And the best way to achieve that, the best way to have a positive, good expectation and perspective on what could be a really difficult situation you're facing is always, 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 always to come back to yourself, reconnect with yourself, to remember yourself, because you are so fucking powerful and you are so limitless. And there are so many beautiful things in store for you, and it gets better and better and better and better. But of course, none of that is possible if you don't know that, and if you don't believe that, and if you're not connected with yourself in that way, if you don't have that kind of relationship with yourself, then you will martyr yourself your whole life, and you will suffer and restrict that and resist the things that you really want. So Happy New Year, everybody. I hope some of these ideas are things that maybe might resonate with you. If you are somebody who's had a diary before, I'd love to hear if that's something you continue with. I'd also love to hear your own resolutions for 2022. And I will keep you guys posted on this vlog of sorts of how I'm going, the challenges that I face. It is for sure that we all face challenges. For sure we all face contrast. But if we can just expect things to get better for us, if we can get back into that relationship with ourselves where we are in step with ourselves, then we find that even the most difficult challenges in our lives lead to the best, most beautiful expansions that we've ever had. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys on the next one.